Well, I'd like to thank our friends and colleagues from Latin America for organizing this very important meeting on a subject of great importance to the World Academy, and I think we can say to the whole world now. We live in challenging times. I'm particularly glad that the Latin American group chose the topic that has been chosen for the day about the democratic crisis in the Americas, the regulation of AI, the crisis of multilateralism, and prospects for global integration. I think it's fair to say that these are issues that are on the agenda of concerned thinkers and policymakers all over the world today. This is appropriate for everybody. I think many of you know that for the last 1 year, or at least 1 year more, the World Academy has been focusing on the issue of what's going on in the world now. We all watch the newspapers, we all see the daily developments in Ukraine or Gaza, the newest advances in AI, the global challenges of the undermining of our global economic trade system, the rising levels of inequality, and so many things. The AI charged weaponry, and also many developments. We get so caught up in the media that it's often hard for us to spend the time and focus on what's really going on here and why are things happening so quickly and so intensely and in such an unexpected manner. In my opening remarks, I'd like to share with you some perspective that we have gotten, especially in 3 meetings in the last 5 months, where we've just been looking at the global situation and trying to understand it. And I'd like to go back a little in history for perspective, very briefly, overview, to think about the period of transition we were in at the end of World War II, when after 2 horrendous world wars and a Great Depression, the world community came together in an unprecedented way. I say world committee, but actually it was only about 50 countries that founded the UN system at that time. In fact, at least 1/3 of the humanity was still under colonial rule by one country or another. So we really didn't have a fully representative government, but it was an unprecedented achievement in human history that after the attempt with the League of Nations, which quickly collapsed, we were able to found the first real multilateral system, which gradually over time grew and grew until it eventually has received a membership of about 193 countries. It was a slow, cumbersome process, but certainly a very important development. And 3 years after the founding of the UN, we had the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was another unprecedented achievement in humanity for the first time, when all the countries of the world sooner or later signed on and said, we agree to the same set of standards, the same values for human beings everywhere. And I think that's the first time in history that we had achieved such a thing. And then we had the years up through the Cold War, too fresh in our minds to talk about it, but where it looked like we were on the verge of destroying one another with the nuclear weapons. And then suddenly, quite suddenly, in 89 and 90, we had the sudden abrupt end of the Cold War, the breakup of the Soviet Union, the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact, the rapid disarmament of the nuclear powers, Russia and the US particularly, and then in quick succession, the founding of the European Union, the World Trade Organization, the founding of the establishment of the internet, the liberalization of the international financial institutions, the breakup of former communist countries, a massive movement towards democracy in the world, and a certain trend of developments in the world, very rapid growth, opening up of trade in an unprecedented way, the very rapid development of China and many other countries as well, that it looked like finally we were passed through the troubled parts of history and we were on our way, and we thought we could see a course that we would develop into the future, that we could anticipate the future, we could project the future, maybe not exactly the speed. And then after we entered the new millennium with the explosive growth of technologies, and then we had the global financial crisis starting in 2008, and things that had looked very colorful and enthusiastic and promising at the turn of the millennium, suddenly the financial crisis, the rising levels of inflation and unemployment, and then the climate problem, which had been around and we've been hearing about it for a long time, but it began to grow in the evidence and the speed of global warming and the degeneration of our environment, that there grew more and more concern. And that takes us to about, in very brief summary, to 2013, when the World Academy was invited by the United Nations office in Geneva to partner with them on a conference which was called The Need for a New Paradigm, Global Challenges and Opportunities. Because it was pretty obvious even then, now about 12 years ago, that the course of action, though it had so many unprecedented promising opportunities to it, the way we were handling it simply wasn't adequate enough. We didn't have the multilateral institutions, we didn't have the policies, we didn't have the programs to handle the speed of social change effectively. And that was quickly followed by the development of the Agenda 2030 that came out in 2015, when 193 countries signed on to 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 targets. Again, an unprecedented step in history. Never had the countries of the world not only agreed in some theoretical principle, but in a very concrete way of what we had to do in concert with each other. Because it was clear that we could not solve these problems on our own, one at a time. We could only solve them if we worked together. And the signing of the Agenda 2030, unanimous consensus on it, was really a remarkable point in history where we thought, well, we got past another very great hurdle because we'd never reached something like this before. And the start of the first years of the Agenda 2030 was somewhat encouraging, maybe not up to our expectations, but then suddenly, by the time we reached to 2020, we hit a wall. And that wall had many names behind it. COVID, the COVID pandemic was one, then the outbreak of war, the invasion of Ukraine, then the greater signs of the acceleration of climate change, rising levels of economic inequality, the Gaza, the war in Gaza, and then the sudden outburst of AI. And at the same time, we saw, it's all recent history, so I don't have to describe it to you, but we saw a sudden reversal in the great progress that had been made in democracy after 1990, a retreat from democracy, autocratic policies and activities, even in democratic, leadingly the model democratic countries, a sharp reversal of the idea of multilateral consensus, and of course, US leading the way by withdrawing from Paris and then and WTO and other things, but a general movement away from the progress we'd made over 30, 35 years to we thought we know where we were going. And now, in so many ways, things became very disturbed. There's been many ways to describe the situation that we've come to. Many, even in the academy, refer to a polycrisis, a multidimensional crisis, which covers economic, political, social, technological, financial, and certainly environmental factors. We have used a different phraseology for it to say that we're in a period of global turbulence, a global turbulence of unprecedented uncertainty, insecurity, instability, which seems to be shaking all the things we thought were in place and we're going in one direction. And we spent a lot of time in the last couple of years trying to understand the roots of that uncertainty and that turbulence, because the challenges we're facing are sitting on a bedrock, a soil of turbulence now. And our conclusion was that unless we address the underlying factors that are causing the global turmoil and disturbance, it's not likely that we'll be able to handle the challenges that we're facing. A good example would be the climate challenge. We needed a consensus on that. We needed a consensus on moving away from fossil fuels and going to renewables. And now we've seen a back shading on those things. So we've been trying to understand what that fertile soil of turbulence is, what has caused it, and how can we try to address it. And I think the topics that we're going to be dealing with in this 3 days on democracy, on artificial intelligence, on multilateralism are really the right signal points. And in order to address those, it's not going to be enough, I believe, that we touch on the policies and the superficial, obvious solutions that we have, that we should put in place to address them, unless we also can do something to bring down the overall turbulence in society. Very quickly, our conclusions are that though it looks like in many respects we're headed right back to the past, but if you look through history, you see that in periods of very rapid change, relatively rapid change, because there's nothing in history that compares with the kind of speed of change that we're undergoing now. The world has never had the speed of change we've had. The speed in terms of the increasing movement of people all over the world, of communications all over the world, of economic interactions and so forth, and in changes in political situations. And the results of that have led to the fragmentation and polarization of societies, the extremism in positions and all, that undermined the stability, the basis of stability on which we were working for some time. And I guess to sum it up very quickly, we see this as a period of unprecedented change, where our capacity to adjust to the change doesn't keep up with the speed of development. And that causes more and more stress in the process, and confusion and questioning about whether we're going in the right direction. And a lot of fear and insecurity comes in the way. And there are many examples, but the one that you're going to be talking about, perhaps it's tomorrow, is the artificial intelligence. Unprecedented technological breakthrough with a tremendous potential for increasing productivity, for creating even a global system of affordable education that's never been available up until now. We've got hundreds of millions of people who don't have access to it. An unprecedented capacity for medical breakthroughs, scientific breakthroughs that can improve health all over the world. And at the same time, a big question mark about the artificial general intelligence and the predictions and concerns that sooner or later, and probably sooner is what many say, it's going to run away from us. It's going to run away with take all our jobs away, and maybe it'll take up much more out of it. There's a lot of discussion going on about how we'll lose control of our technology and we'll lose control of our society and all. Let's just say it's uncertainty at a big level without prediction. And so a question as I see it, and what I'd like to pose to this group for this very interesting discussion is, how do we develop the leadership that will help us go through this turbulent period? How do we recover our sense of direction and clarity? How do we understand this very challenging experience that the world is going through and have the leadership that can project a vision and a pathway with a sense of confidence? And most importantly, how do we reorient our institutions, which are shaking and looking at going backwards in many ways, moving in the wrong direction? How do we go to the next level of stable institutions that can lead us through this turbulence to another period of transition? And my final comments are, I think that the way I see the issue is, all through history, transitions and turbulence have occurred not because the whole world got together and did it, but because things happened all over the world in their own haphazard way, and people imitated other people and reacted to them in their own defensiveness and all. But that's not going to work now. We need to be able to do this together. We need to be able to develop a global consensus. We need to be able to get a shared global vision. And it's not enough to just go in this haphazard way. We need to be able, for the first time in history, to navigate a conscious transition or a conscious transformation of our society. And we need the institutions to support it. And that's the last item in your list for the third day, is the multilateral system and regional cooperation. So I certainly don't mean to either simplify or minimize the challenge we're under, but I certainly don't also want to come across as if I think this is a hopeless case. I don't think that at all. I think that we have all the incentive, we have all the knowledge, we have the money, we have the capacities to do this transition faster and better than ever has been done before, but we are not there now. We're not ready. We don't have the leadership. We don't even have the knowledge. We don't even have the knowledge of how do you convert our haphazard way of moving around and changing into a conscious transition process. And what type of institutions do we need, and how are we going to get there? So with that, I very much look forward to your presentations and to learning from the discussions in these 3 days and seeing what we can take back, all of us, to our own work, and so we can learn from this and build our momentum for the work of the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Garry. Well, it is very fortunate that we have you to give to us this very, very wide tableau of what has been taking place in the last 50 years or so. And it is true that we live in really challenging and interesting times, but for sure, I don't think I would change this time of our history for any other. There are so many fascinating things that are taking place, some others which are very dangerous. So the choice of so I speak here in the name of the organizing committee from Brazilian, Latin American chapter of the World Academy of Art and Science. The choice of the theme for this 3-day symposium is, as Garry pointed out, very apt. All these are very current issues. Artificial intelligence in particular is perhaps the one that interests me personally most. You may remember, Garry, we were together at the conference, I think 6 years ago, where I spoke about the promises and the challenges that the existential risk or opportunities that the AI would offer to humankind. The paper came from that, and I think that what I wrote in that paper is still very valid today. It's one of the papers I am fond of. So we especially the issue of artificial general intelligence or super intelligence, as it has also been called, is it's very close. Yeah. Most people would say that in the next 5 to 10 years it will be a reality. Other people say it is even sooner. But we will need to deal with that as humans. It's perhaps the greatest challenge that we will be facing as a species. On the other hand, we have the other themes in this conference, which are democracy and the global economy. So democracy. So we all of us believed like 20 years ago that democracy was really increasing, spreading vigorously throughout the world. But we now see that it is challenged everywhere. So several of us live in Brazil, and we can see that despite the results of the election that took place about 2 years ago, the threat is still very active, and it is coming not only from outside, but from inside. And that is the case in many countries, of course, in the United States, and in many European countries where anti-democratic authoritarian forces are moving forward. So it is a difficult time for democratic values. I am, let's say, differently from artificial intelligence, I am perhaps more optimistic. I think that democracy will finally prevail because it is a superior system. We will go through these times and emerge hopefully stronger. On the other hand, it's not so clear about the situation of the global economy. I will talk much more about that in the third session of this conference on Wednesday, because I will be a panelist. But the global economy has been its globalist character has been challenged for a long time already. So, well, all of these terms are, of course, coming. We are going to see that throughout these 3 days. Now, of course, I do not want to extend myself too long. I think that Garry has really said the most important things that have to be said as an opening to the conference. What I would want to add is that from our part of the world in Latin America, we see all these themes as an opportunity for our region to become more and more inserted into the global discussion. And that goes as well into the discussion at large and also within the World Academy itself. We really look forward to becoming more active in discussions within the Academy and to take a more significant part in its activities in the future. And with that, let me welcome you all to this short conference. Thank you very much.
Okay, I believe that we need to start our conference right now. By the way, my name is Danielle Sandi. I will moderate this section. Everybody, welcome. I believe that Professor Saulo Casali will be our first speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and welcome and good evening, good morning, good afternoon of all. We are joining people all around the world, and it was very. Uh, we have a lot of happiness to stay here after the dream to make the third Latin America seminar after a dinner table where the organizing committee was present, and we we believe it that we could have this initiative and to discuss so many relevant themes, following the general lines that Garry already spoke to us. Let's go ahead. We have 6 people. I will share a PowerPoint presentation, and I would like to discuss democratic crisis in the Americas. Are you so? Let's go ahead. I'm a professor at the Federal University of Bahia, a law professor. I'm federal judge also, and I am a WAAS fellow and a member of the board of trustees. And I would like to remember January 6th, 21, Trump Save America March. Be there, we will be wild. You have to show strength and you have to be strong. We will stop the steal. You will have an illegitimate president. These are facts that you won't hear from the fake news media. It's all part of the suppression effort. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you are not going to have a country anymore. Take back our country. Trump's words. And we experienced a very similar thing in Brazil some month later with the invasion of the Congress, invasion of the Supreme Court building and the presidential palace also, January 8th, 2023, after loss of the 2022 elections by Bolsonaro. We experienced this kind of thing in Brazil, very similar. And we experienced a coup of state attempt, a call for military intervention, an intention of a forced removal of members of the Supreme Court, and even murder of political opponents here in Brazil. And after this kind of thing, the judiciary, the Supreme Court declared Bolsonaro's ineligibility until 2030 for attacks on electronic voting machines and the electoral system and risk of criminal conviction for anti-democratic acts. And what happened after this? And why it happened? Well, I put in this slide that the human relationship is mediated by social media. We have nowadays about 4.5 billion people using social media constantly. WhatsApp has 2 billion users in the world. In Brazil, 93% of Brazilians are users, 96% daily. WeChat has 1.3 billion users, Facebook 3 billion users. And the logic for social media is the engagement. And for the engagement, the conspiracy rhetoric is very useful because engagement is the way of life of the social media. Engagement is higher when it involves emotions, and with the emotions, it's us against them or us against our enemies. Emotions are related with a permanent fight, permanent connection, interaction through daily pushes, messages, stimulus, usually bombastic to defend, save our values, beliefs, necessities against daily new or permanent threats with the creation of bubbles, clusters, using the profile technique. And this background creates a sensation of empowerment, at least the feeling of empowerment of the ordinary citizen. Ordinary citizen have the idea or the hate of elites and the privileged fear. We know that the multitude is not so rational, and individuals have always fear from change and loss. And it's possible to exploit this kind of revolt against traditional leaders who don't care about the interests of the voters. And they told all the time, truth of the fact is finally exposed by the freedom of the social media. Or if you are in favor of control of social media, you are for the elites and enemy of the ordinary citizen. But they forgot what Zuckerberg at the American Congress told 2018, platforms are not information intermediaries. They determine the content of the information. And with this kind of background, voters, we can feel that we can realize that voters have loss aversion. It's a human heuristic. Those who defend the maintenance of desired values will be accepted as leader. So we will see with the idea of to mobilize emotions, the rhetoric of defense of traditional values, family, property, homeland, God, religion, you lose it. So those who subvert traditional family values will be seen as enemies. Who defends traditional values are the true patriots. It's a game, argumentative game of association, dissociation. Here in Brazil, in Brasilia, the figure of the patriots with the national flag adhesion, even the political leaders trying to use the national flag here in Brazil. And what happened after the invasion? After the invasion, there was an investigation. And what happened? The policemen that are involved with the investigation started to perceive that they and their family, their relatives, their children started to be exposed in social media, photos, address. It's an idea to promote some kind of coercion against the investigation, the policial investigation, the criminal investigation. And the Supreme Court started to investigate it and to deal with this case. And X, the social network X, was involved with this kind of dissemination of fake news. And the Supreme Court ordered X to stop with this. Identify, block the channels, profiles, accounts related with this kind of fake news dissemination. And X didn't agree with that. No accomplishment. There was another re-notification fine was increased, but access remained with the same idea that will not obey the Supreme Court order. If you see this picture, is a manifestation of Elon Musk in X. One day, Alexander de Moraes was the justice of our Supreme Court in charge of the case, and he, from the position of prosecutor, he was prosecuted. Elon Musk put him after the bars of a jail. The picture of you in prison will be real, marking my words. It's a menace, right? And this fight between X and the Brazilian Supreme Court started. And the Supreme Court told that the illicit conduct of Elon Musk and ex-Brazil Internet continues, so put a fine higher, 80 million reais. In the Brazilian law, established that alongside freedom of expression, there will be the necessity to respect human rights and the protection of privacy. There is civil liability of internet application providers for damages resulting from content generated by third parties, and what happened in our law, under our law. In order to ensure freedom of expression and prevent censorship, the internet application provider may only be held civilly liable for damages resulting from content generated by third parties if, after a specific court order, it fails to take steps to, within the scope and technical limits of its services and within the specified period, make the content identified as infringing unavailable except for legal provisions to the contrary. And Elon Musk told that he will not follow the order from the Supreme Court. And he wrote that last night, Alexandre de Moraes, the justice, threatened our legal representative in Brazil with arrests if we don't comply with his censorship orders. We did so in a secret order, which we share here to expose his action, despite the fact that our numerous appeals to the Supreme Court have not been heard. The Brazilian public has not been informed about these orders and content on our platform. Moraes chose to threaten our team in Brazil instead of respect the law of due process. As a result, in order to protect the safety of our team, we have made the decision to cease our operations in Brazil effective immediately. Service X remains available to the people of Brazil. We are deeply saddened that we have been forced to make this decision. The responsibility lies solely with Alexandre de Moraes. His actions are incomparable with a democratic government. The Brazilian people have a choice to make: democracy or Alexandre de Moraes. So we see that, and the Supreme Court answered to him. Once again, Elon Musk confuses freedom of expression with a non-existent freedom of aggression, deliberately confuses censorship with the constitutional prohibition of hate speech and incite to undemocratic acts. So it's a fake news circulated faster than real news, true news. There are some. This is a part of decision of our Supreme Court, and this is. The Supreme Court put that it's a very diffused problem, more than 81 countries association trying to do something against algorithms that create association with emotions and communication, putting disinformation, and we experienced that. And finally, last month, we have the Magnitsky Law against this justice of our Supreme Court. The United States decided to put him, because he was against the freedom of expression, so he cannot have bank accounts anymore. All the visas were finished from he and his relatives. Other justice, Brazilian justice, are under menace also. It's the situation nowadays in Brazil. My last slide. Democracy must be tolerant with the intolerant. It's a tolerance paradox. We have the freedom of expression, is more or less the procedimental democracy, and the others human rights, the material democracy. Loewenstein, 1930, told about the militant democracy as a matter of principle. And we are nowadays in this moment where we don't know if we have the totalitarian democracy or unreal democracy. Thank you. And I would like to just to share some thoughts about the democratic crisis in the Americas, starting with my country, Brazil. Thank you very much by your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Saulo.
Danielle.
Let me say something.
Danielle.
I'll thank you very much for your considerations. These are very important considerations nowadays. And let me to speak it just a little bit. Sometimes I am not Italian, but I've heard that Rome is a plebe. Rome is a people. Plebe in Portuguese, people. So I believe that that this kind of dystopia that we are living nowadays needs to captivate the people, a plebe in Portuguese. So I because Professor Alberto Zucconi can speak a little bit, but I would like to manifest my opinion. So I believe that finishing that we need to think about how to speak with the people. Thank you very much. Professor Alberto Zucconi, please.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, democracy is in decline, as many of you have said. There are many institutions, independent institutions. For example, the Freedom of House Freedom on the World report, the last report, show how human rights, civil liberty, and institutional check and balance are on the decline. This is the sad situation that we are witnessing today. For example, the score in the Americas dropped from 80 to 65. And the global score even dropped worse than that, 61 to 45. The erosion of trust is a pandemic in the institution, in the government, in the media. The climate inaction and environmental degradation is evident and rampant. Food insecurity and social inequality on the rise, and the failures of defending and promoting human rights and even sovereignty of countries, national borders. So you can see the graphic here is, really significant decline. In the States, in the United States, I'm not going to spend so many words. Already Saulo showed it dramatically, but the score of democracy dropped from 2010 to 2024, which is the last report, considerably, from 94 to 83. And the polarization, the Capitol riot, the disinformation. So United States is barely in the free country, but with the significant declining of trust and stability. The key drivers on decline, I agree with what Garry said. We even wrote on the last Cadmus issue a big article on this. Populist authoritarianism, militarization and impunity, attacks on civil society and the media, disinformation and polarization. According to the data we have, judges, prosecutors, and defense lawyers have been imprisoned, detained, or charged for political motivated reason at least in 78 countries over the last 10 years. In the Americas, the largest decline has been Nicaragua, minus 40, El Salvador, minus 28, and Venezuela, 22. The leaders, authoritarian leaders, are really dismantling democracy and having entrenched the authoritarian rules. This is what it looks the situation in the Americas. Green is free, yellow is partly free, and violet is not free. So in the Americas, and not only in the Americas, in the world, the threat to freedom are violence, also caused by big organized criminal organization, corruption, and repressive tactics that the government use to combat crime, but in the same time reduce democracy. Of course, there are also good signs of democratic resilience in the Americas, Chile, Colombia, and Brazil. It's no doubt that democracy in the Americas and around the world is under attack. And so, what can we do? Well, the proven variables that are really countering the decline of democracy are institutional resilience and people engagement are key to recover. People, ongoing vigilance and international solidarity needed to restore trust. I suggest, and we have ample international evidence, it's not just an idea, that what works is to create solid work alliance that takes steps towards the building and promotion of people-centered democratic future. What I mean by that? I mean just people organizing at the community, regional, and national level, international level, and create communities that we need to facilitate their communication and sharing of best practices. So there are many projects around the world that are flourishing. In Italy, where I live, and where also democracy is in decline, well, we need to let people know that what is going on, and also the good news, something can be done. And so we can help building global networks, and also need a researcher and a facilitator. We need to offer free data bank of people-centered democratic best practices so people can learn. And also use a standardized scientific tool for data collection and use what is a very scientific and well-oiled tool, participatory action research, where you do the change and you research at the same time, but the researcher, assisted by some professional, are the people and the community themselves. So I am pleading for doing in concrete some solid working alliance and building a democratic, people-centered future that require inclusive and community participatory action. So we need to denounce the decline of democracy, but we need to do more. In our daily life, we need to heal, empower, and transform our society, defending in our daily life and supporting human rights, human security, and democracy for all in our daily life. So we need to talk our walk and to walk our talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Zucconi. I believe that your suggestions of effective actions in micro and macro levels are very important to effectively in our societies to motivate the people. Plebe in Portuguese. Rome is the people. Thank you very much. So let's get with the Manuelita Hermes, our professor here in Brazil. Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. So I'm Manuelita Hermes, I'm from Brazil, PhD at University of Rome, Tor Vergata, and University of Brasilia. Sorry, what's happening? It's going, okay. Also Federal State Attorney and Professor of Law and WAAS Fellow. I'd like to give my main thanks to Professor Garry Jacobs and also to all the organizing committee for being here during this event. I'm so happy for being part of this organizing committee with the panelists that have already given brilliant expositions like Professor Saulo and Professor Alberto Zucconi, and welcome to Professors Wolff, Norberto, Filho, and Kenneth Williams. Well, I remember that the last time we've been together during another event, it was during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and then I will bring some remarks from that time when I focused on the Supreme Federal Court of Brazil. And now, again, I will have this focus. But I would like to remember that time when I tried to understand the whole of the Supreme Federal Court in Brazil. And I remember that I brought some reflections about the actions and the inactions in Brazil during the pandemic, and I related it with our democracy, with our rights, human rights, fundamental rights, and social rights. And we had the health crisis also in the middle of a political, economic, and social crisis here in Brazil. Well, the pandemic emphasized the inequality, the extreme poverty, and also a lot of wealth in the hands of the few. This is our society here in Brazil. And also something that is related to the Latin American context. I mean, we have this inequality and this democracy that is trying to be something strong, trying to be resilient here also in our region, the Latin America. Another point that I emphasized by that time was the presidentialism here in the Brazil, and the way that we need to face the pandemic in a presidentialist system and the whole of the Supreme Federal Court to try to keep the health, to keep the social rights, although the lack and the inaction of the president by that time. So we have this system, presidentialism, that is also something very common in this Latin American context. And nowadays, as we saw by the Professor Saulo, Saulo's exposition, we have it's another issue now: the judiciary branch and the executive branch in this context of the presidentialism. So we have this context of the federalism. Brazil is a huge state. You can say it's a continental state, federal state, and it's hard to achieve the equality, to achieve the rights, the social rights, and all the fundamental rights and human rights in the same level in the whole country. So during the pandemic, we have this issue, the social rights, the federalism, and also the presidentialism. And I have the focus at the Supreme Federal Court. And today I will talk a little bit more about the Supreme Federal Court. Here we can see the judiciary branch, how it is organized here in Brazil. So the Supreme Federal Court and all the other courts, the low levels, since the judge, the first degree, we can say like this, to go to the upper courts, that is the Supreme Federal Court. So during the pandemic, the Supreme Federal Court had a great role by judging cases related to the way the country, the way Brazil had to cope with the crisis, the pandemic crisis. And nowadays, we have also the Supreme Federal Court with a great role in this federal state with the presidentialist state. And then we can talk a little bit about the constitutional jurisdiction and democracy. As Professor Saulo introduced, we had this attempt of coup d'etat, January 8, 2023. It's a date, a mark in our history, a mark after the reconstitutionalization, the redemocratization that we had with the Federal Constitution of 1988. And then we have already, the whole of the Supreme Federal Courts trying to maintain democracy. This building was invaded. These glasses were destroyed. That sculpture was, I don't know how to say it, I'm sorry. But scenes that are in our mind, crimes that were committed and are under investigation and also under judgments in our country. Then the courts, the Supreme Federal Court is with this new task, trying to maintain the democracy, trying to reinforce the federalism, trying to maintain the design, the institutional design, the presidentialism and the federalism in our country. And I remember I have read this book a long time ago, Alex Stone Sweets, Today We Govern with Judges. And today in Brazil, we can say that actually we govern with the Supreme Federal Court. And the president nowadays, he said this. Actually, he said this by July 2nd, that he needs the Supreme Federal Court to govern. He needs the Supreme Federal Court to maintain democracy. And they have now the legislative branch with another task, trying to keep the resistance, trying to undermine the dialogue, and it's a crisis that's going on in our country. So the value given to the political issue and also the fulfillment of judicial decisions from the constitutional jurisdiction in democracy is a subject that we have to face related to judicial politics. Ron Herschel, professor that I really like to study him. He examined the so-called constitutional revolutions in countries like Canada, New Zealand, Israel, South Africa, highlighting the political origins of the constitutionalism as a preponderant factor in understanding judicial expansion and judicialization of politics. And I guess Brazil was not a topic, was not something that the object of his studies, but I guess I can construct, the same way to try to explain the way we are keeping this force, keeping this necessity. We need the judiciary branch and the constitutional jurisdiction. So considering this, the courts and here in Brazil, the Supreme Federal Court are going beyond the boundaries, and it's more than talk about democracy, more than talk about democracy in Latin America. We have a lot of variations of democratic countries and non-democratic countries. United States, we have already talking about it. Sweden, Hungary, Italy also is an issue, and the waves that we can see nowadays in our world. And I would like to just mention now, so I was talking about the world. This is an issue in Brazil, there's an issue in Latin America, but we can also find other countries facing something related to it. But just to finish the Brazilian context, I'd like to emphasize that this difficulty of dialogue between the executive branch and the judiciary branch that was related to the other exposition of Professor Saulo, for example, and now we have the legislative branch. It's something that we face from the beginning. In the last century, in the 18th century, we had this case, Municipal Council of the Federal District, and this habeas corpus, and the Federal Supreme Court ruled, and the ancient president, the former president, Hermes da Fonseca, he just said that he would not consider the decision by the Federal Supreme Court because of the invasion of the attributions. These limits between the politics and the judicial issue and the whole of the Supreme Federal Court, this debate is present in our country a long time ago. So it's something that if we look behind, if we understand our history, we can pick a lot of cases along the time. And then I would like just to take this picture of the past because it was related precisely to a president, Hermes da Fonseca. And then going to our moments, to our days, I would like to emphasize this moment post-January 8th. So the militant, the vigilant democracy, the whole of the judiciary in this militant and vigilant democracy, with this democracy that's not so mature, it's something that we have to take care all days, during the whole day. And so we have to this environment also with social media, with artificial intelligence, this lawless land. And we had last month, July or June, I don't remember exactly, another decision for the Supreme Federal Court related to the freedom of expression, related to the social media, and this is also an issue nowadays here, and it's part of the attempt to maintain democracy in all the space, virtual or not, and to future. I'm going to the end already. I'd like to just think about the future, our future, I mean, Brazil, but also looking at another country. That, I mean, maybe the context that led to this moment in this other country may have some similarities with our country nowadays, the context nowadays. And I'm talking about Mexico. So when I talk to Brazil, I'm talking about constitutional jurisdiction, democracy, judiciary branch, and we have the Mexico example now with the reform, that the amendment of the constitution and the completely different design of the judiciary. So we have a new model in our context. And it was designed after the judiciary branch and la Suprema Corte de la Nación, after a moment of decisions that had an impact at the executive branch, that had an impact at the legislative branch. And for some scholars, this amendment of the Mexican Constitution is a kind of revenge. It's a kind of way to tell to the judiciary branch that it may be more democratic, but at the same time is something that you went beyond the limits, and now we will give the limits. So it's a country that's also has also a colonial past. It's also a federative country. It's also a presidentialist country, and it has great dimensions like Brazil. I mean, comparative law has this kind of way to compare. And I mean, Mexico has a lot of similarities with Brazil. And I guess it's something that we have to keep the eyes on. It's a country that we have to keep the eyes on and understand a lot with the experience that Mexico is facing now. And then beyond Mexico, I would like to just mention that we have also the Inter-American human rights system, and we are not alone. And democracy is also a human right, and we have to go beyond the judiciary national branch, and we can go to the judiciary branch, I mean, of a regional system, an international court, an international system like the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. And related to this topic, to this theme, we have already the advisory opinion on democracy and political rights that was demanded by Guatemala, and we are waiting for this opinion. And in the Latin American context, I mean, it will be something to follow, to really appreciate. And I have this expectation. I'm waiting for this opinion, advisory opinion, because we are nowadays in a context in Latin America and in the world that we need to have more efforts in a regional context, and by consequence in the multi-level constitutionalism, to enhance the way to protect democracy, to enhance the way to protect human rights. So I finish here with my more reflections than answers about our context and about our country. Thank you so much, and I give here my email to contact. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Professor Manuelita. Your considerations about democratic relevance and the crisis that we are living nowadays focus on the effective actions that maybe we can follow, and we can suggest, we can invest in our classes, in the people, in our speeches at all. Thank you very much. And then let's follow our seminar with Professor Ralph Wolff. Thank you, please, Professor. It's your time.
Thank you. In talking, my background's been in higher education and as president of the World University Consortium, working with universities. But in talking with people in the U.S., what's happened in the last 6 months is so breathtaking. They wanted to urge me to share and to say, people need to be aware of what's going on because it's only been 6 months under the new administration. And we need to make sure it doesn't happen elsewhere because it easily could. Let me just provide a background. Many would say the business model of higher education in the U.S. was broken before Trump was elected, but it's a very large system, over 3,900 degree-granting institutions, 19 million students, and a wide range of different kinds of institutions. But there's been much more competition, mainly from China, but other countries and England, for top research universities. And in the last decade, the number of U.S. institutions has dropped to 36, which means it's much more competitive. And the search for top research dollars and faculty up until now was critical for top universities. The rest of the system had low completion rates, tuition beyond inflation, high student debt, all of which led to a cratering of public trust. To give you an example, fewer than 20% of Republicans believe higher education was serving the country well, 50% of Democrats, but that's still not encouraging. And we are facing in the U.S. a demographic cliff of 18 to 24-year-olds declining. And so apart from international students and immigrants, the whole population will not grow for the future. 55% of research and development grants to universities come from the federal government. And overall, in the last 25 years, state funding has not kept up with the increased costs of higher education. So one would say that higher education was struggling or had to deal with a number of issues even before Trump came into power. But I do think that it's been breathtaking, and to the extent, as Garry mentioned earlier, we need to train next leadership. What's happening in research universities and all universities is what you might call a devastating set of blows. Every day something new is happening. This is the model for the Trump administration. Today, he just announced he's taking over policing in the District of Columbia, the capital city, calling out the National Guard. We'll plan to do that and put on notice other Democratic cities. You might say we are experiencing our own form of a coup through democracy, but for higher education and to the extent that it has led research in health and technology and other areas, these blows are devastating, and I'll explain. So he immediately imposed within a few days a 15% research overhead cap. At major universities, it was 50 to 60%. So we're talking about a loss of hundreds of millions of dollars immediately, without any notice, to major research universities. I should add, as I'll describe in a couple of slides, he is now privileging non-top research universities for grants who have no experience in these major fields. those of us who worked with Arizona State for a conference that we were going to participate in experienced an immediate cutoff of grant or research projects that weren't aligned with priorities. And you need to understand that under the Biden administration, in order to get grants, you needed to show how you were, for many areas of grants, how you were impacting positively the inclusion of racial and ethnic minorities. So diversity and equity was a major issue for grants, as well as sustainability projects. Those are not aligned with President Trump's priorities, and so literally thousands of grants have been summarily terminated in the middle of their operation. All diversity, equity, and inclusion activities have been eliminated. 2 weeks' notice, even though this had been a standing policy for 20 years. 2 weeks' notice to comply to eliminate all diversity DEI offices. I'll go into more detail. You may have heard about Elon Musk and Doge, eliminating, the best estimate is 154,000 federal employees, including major areas of research and data collection across the government, including the order to eliminate the entire Department of Education. They can't do it fully without Congress, but they're doing as much as they can. And so the whole data collection unit of the Department of Education has been terminated and gutted. You probably have read that there's been a direct and daily assault on Columbia. Now there's a settlement with them. Now it's continuing with Harvard, asking for hundreds of millions of dollars payback. They've withheld hundreds of millions of dollars of research. They've held up $580 million of research from UCLA and asking for $1 billion payment. It's like tribute for alleged illegal activity, anti-Semitic activity as a result of pro-Palestinian protests. He's delayed, there are over 1 million international students, the U.S., particularly at the graduate level, been a major way of training the leadership in the world and also bringing in new leadership into the U.S. Many of the technology companies rely heavily on Indian computer scientists and experts in technology and AI. And he at first suspended, then delayed, and continues to delay visas for international students, and recently just imposed a visa processing fee. All sustainability efforts across the government have been suspended, and there is now an effort to remove the linchpin finding, which is that climate change impacts health negatively. And the new head of the EPA has just started a process to remove all EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, regulations that are based on the health consequences that is caused by climate change. He's a former oil executive, so you might imagine. But if this were to occur, it would take years, possibly decades, and an act of Congress to restore this finding. He's, as you probably have heard, has deported foreign students for pro-Palestinian views. They've eliminated habeas corpus, have claimed the right to take people off the street without charging them, deport them to foreign countries. Not even though the Supreme Court has required that there would be a hearing, they have tried to deport not only students but U.S. citizens or people with green cards that are legitimately here, deport them without any hearing. They have arrested people in courts just as they're leaving courts, seeking asylum status. They've settled, well, I'll explain about the Colombia settlement. There's the big, beautiful bill that just got passed by Congress that transfers wealth to the top 1% and will take 11 million people off of Medicare and health support. They've capped loan support for graduate programs at 100,000. Most programs are well beyond that, so it will have a substantial impact on graduate and professional programs. They've increased the endowment tax as a way of going after these top research universities, which would be a $4 billion charge for Harvard. It goes on and on. If you would say every day there is something new that's stunning the leadership of all universities. He's issued an executive order that requires all admissions data now to be reviewed by, we're not clear who, the Department of Education, since it's being gutted, but to make sure that race and gender is not used to privilege enrollment. Political appointees will need to review and approve all grants, unheard of before. It used to be peer review process. He's outlawed transgender women in women's sports or men in women's sports, bathrooms and the like. The settlement, just wanted to say that Colombia's agreed. I wanted to just say this is kind of frightening, if you will, but Colombia agreed to this, that agreed to pay $200 million over 3 years to settle a civil rights investigation that claimed that the pro-Palestinian encampments at Colombia were illegal and led to anti-Semitic behavior against Jewish students and staff. There undoubtedly were problems, but the overextension, or if you will, the overreach is breathtaking. That the total payback is $220 million that enabled them to restore $400 million in grants. But this is, if you will, bribery and corruption. Colombia must, and now all universities must change all race-based, not just for students, but hiring in any staff and faculty, and have a monitor. If you can imagine, even though the Supreme Court outlawed race, they would use zip codes where there were high schools in poverty areas to privilege students who might not have had opportunities, or diversity narrative statements and admissions. All of that's being outlawed. They were required by this settlement to reduce their reliance on international students. Over 50% of the graduate students at Columbia are international students. And that you can imagine they have to now vet international applicants. Why do you want to study in the U.S. and report and be agents of the federal government to report any disciplinary actions to the federal government? They have to appoint new faculty in Jewish and Israel studies and review Middle Eastern studies, which are primarily focused on Middle Eastern and Arab countries. Ban mass protests. I could go on and on. Independent monitor that actually, if Colombia doesn't resolve, there will be an independent monitor that could force compliance. I would just say this is just the beginning. Every day there is something new. You can imagine the financial shock that this creates. Already many institutions are canceling or downsizing major research projects around cancer, particularly in health area. One of the largest areas of research funding is for cancer research and new use of technology in research. In any event, as I said, that this shift in the research capacity, there is no other source because they are going after foundations in the same way. there is tremendous uncertainty what will happen next, but also what will be found illegal. For example, all admissions and hiring has to be on merit. What does that mean in this new world? There is a requirement of viewpoint diversity. What does that mean? You can imagine there's fear all across actually all across the U.S. And there is a tremendous shift in funding away from medical research, away from anything that will be gender-based or look at differential outcomes for different cultural groups, to defense spending, and some for AI, but mainly the AI spending is actually coming from the technology companies. There's been tremendous suppression of speech. You're not allowed to use the term climate change, anything coming out of the government. And as I said, they've already started to withdraw from most federal regulations and are opening up oil and gas exploration in many protected areas. What's happening is many research scientists are now either trying to move or some have already moved. There will be express limitation on foreign students, particularly from China and Muslim countries. He's banned all visas from, I believe, 7 Muslim countries. Like I mentioned earlier, it's hard to say that we are a nation ruled a rule of law. One of in the exchange earlier was, what does democracy mean? I would say that part of democracy is that we are governed by laws, not by corruption and personal whims. We are seeing the reverse of that in the U.S. now. 16 straight Supreme Court decisions, most of which have no findings, just supporting the Trump administration without any explanation. And we've seen personal revenge actions against law firms, against foundations, against individuals, removing even the security clearance of former Presidents Obama, Biden, and even Republican George Bush. And they're now investigating not only President Obama for 2016 supposed Russian involvement in the election, but everyone involved in the January 6th prosecution, Jack Smith and others. As you can imagine, this is overwhelming the higher education community. No one has been able to figure out a response yet, and right now there's chaos and there is uncertainty, there is fear, there is trying to figure out, do you negotiate, do you fight? Harvard has been suing. UCLA with $1 billion threat against it. The governor of California is weighing in, but we haven't even really, I've been reading about the people who are leading this. They have in their quiver more actions to take, and they have just begun. It's a pretty frightening, that you can know, it's a question whether gender studies, area studies will be allowed to continue. They're trying to control curriculum through the administration of DEI. If you can believe that the very term cultural competence has the potential of being outlawed under a new legal opinion issued by the Department of Justice, if used in a way to privilege one group over another. Let me just say that we're in the early stage of there are 3.5 years left of this administration. So there is tremendous, you might imagine, tremendous concern about what this will mean about the role, not just the role of U.S. higher education, but it's now being used to go to K-12 education, which is being privatized, but also the inability to focus on diversity, where most of the school districts in every major city in the U.S. is majority minority. And so they have withheld billions of dollars of funding for the K-12 schools as well as higher education. So it's a major transformation. I could say every government agency is experiencing these kind of whipsaw changes. When we talk about democracy, one of the challenges is Trump was voted in. This is Project 2025 being implemented. It was public. It was known. While he disowned it, those of us who knew the people of the Heritage Foundation who wrote it are now leading the government. We're in for a very rough ride ahead. And I will say that there is no clear pathway that people have found yet. We're all looking for how do we address this tremendous assault on democracy, on democratic principles, and on the rule of law. So let me stop there and just say I appreciate your attention and hope that we can learn from models that have been shown elsewhere. But I will have to say that the MAGA party that supports Trump is to the right of him, and they are not supportive of higher education, nor of public education. And so he still has a strong level of support from his core group, and it is unclear that we have, any of us or any organization has found a way to blunt these actions. While there have been lower court actions to stop them, in each area, the Supreme Court has overturned them when he has appealed them. So let me say that it's not a very pleasant moment in our history and for the future of higher education, but we remain hopeful that people will try to find ways to address this and to figure out how to move forward with less funding and with constantly being monitored to protect really white privilege. So I'll stop there and wish I could offer a more optimistic view at this point, but it is sobering to see what is happening, and hope that we can continue conversations like this and also create alternatives to some extent outside the U.S. As well as pathways inside the U.S. So thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Professor Wolff. And your considerations are beyond the higher education. I believe that this kind of leadership, the objective of this kind of leadership is to destroy the democratic and education and to contamine the rest of Americas together with this family of sociopaths, Bolsonaro's sociopaths family that are going with them and the other kind of vested interests. So the higher education is the top, but the education at all could be destroyed with this kind of sociopathic point of view and feelings. Thank you very much. Let's start with the seminar with Professor Ilton Norberto from Brazil. Thank you, Professor. It's your time.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. I heard my colleagues talking about important themes as the U.S. education problems nowadays. My colleagues Manuelita, Hermes, Saulo, Bahia also. So I will talk today about a field of study that I'm writing some papers, digital sovereignty. I'm sharing the slide. You are seeing that? Yes, thank you very much, Manuelita. So, of course, the one important theme in public law and public discussions are sovereignty. And democracy nowadays has a huge impact about digital technology. We are talking, for example, of social media, but also with another kind of technology as artificial intelligence. So, of course, sovereignty is it's a traditional theme in public law, constitutional law. But in this field, what we are trying to discuss, scholars and professors all around the world, is the idea that we have to use a state sovereignty, a popular sovereignty, to deal rightly about the problems in constitutional democracy. So let me pass here. Okay. So first, we have a research agenda about how can we act in national, in regional, and in a world acts and activities. Of course, the theme of democracy, the discussions about technologies are a world discussion, but it's very difficult to build some consensus about important things. Of course, we as professors, as researchers, and the international community in somehow are trying to build some consensus. But we see that is very difficult because in many nations we have a lot of polarity and we have a lot of extremism that it's difficult to build something together in the state, national state agenda. It's difficult, very difficult to build something in regional discussions. Professor Manuelita, for example, point out the International American Court and the discussions about democracy. But we know, unfortunately, important countries in our region, American region, deal with not much stronger efforts with the American human rights system. So it's a difficult, and of course, in the world discussions, very complicated issues. But digital sovereignty as an important research agenda points out that in somehow some regions and some countries are trying to deal with the power, the state power, the popular power, in a way that try to promote rule of law, try to promote civil rights, fundamental rights, rethinking, reanalyzing old important civil liberties as freedom of speech or academic freedom. Professor Wolff explained the problem we have in US today about academic freedom. So how we deal with academic freedom in these days that we have important technology, but we have also an difficult communication with the society, with some important part of people about ideas, about science formulations. So in some way, this research agenda try to rethink important fundamental rights, try to rethink the functions and the way that they design the institutions in national, in regional, and world activities. We see this the use of digital sovereignty with some in many European Union documents, important European documents, and we see also nowadays the discussions in Brazil and in other countries. So, of course, rethinking sovereignty is an idea we see in the literature when we are dealing with constitutional law. For example, Peter Heberle, an important German professor, discussed from many years ago the importance of to review, for example, the concept of sovereignty and how we can somehow rethink this concept. And of course, to think about the idea of people and idea of territory. We know, for example, when President Trump writes something in his social media, this has a huge impact in seconds and all around the world. So the way that the power of, for example, an important country, United States, with the use of social media can do in all around the world. And for example, for us in Brazil, that we are dealing with some difficult problems about the way that the actual United States federal administration are seeing the role of Supreme Court of Brazil, that is doing an important job, a good job to maintain democracy, to preserve rule of law. So the way that power of one country, for example, can do with the use of digital technology impacting the sovereignty of other countries and the institutions of other countries in seconds. And this is something we have to think and study. Professor Garry Jacobs, in his open session, was thinking about what we can do together, what we can do in the world perspective, not some local perspective. And I think we as professors, we as academics, we have to think, and we have to build theories and analyze the problems, and focus nowadays more in the what we can unite, what we can do together with the core elements of the exercise of power in a rule of law states. So, of course, in this discussion of digital sovereignty, we see a lot of interest, economic interests about important companies, United States and China, that we call big techs in some way. And some of the discussions and the regulation about these companies in United States and China are important for this company, but do very bad from all around the world. The impact of this regulation and the way that the regulation is done. So, for example, in digital society, in social media, I think we have as academics to think in a way to do a regulation. Of course, we have to use our sovereignty of our nations, of our regions. But how can we, as academics, think about the proper way, the right way in a rule of law state to deal with the impact of social media, impact of artificial intelligence. Of course, this is difficult. We have to discuss a lot with the colleagues and the academics, and of course the civil society, and with all the actors that are involved. But I think it's important agenda that we have to deal with that. In Brazil, we are in some way dealing with these issues. Professor Saulo Bahia showed some things, some themes that we are discussing. Professor Manuelita also, and in our way, we're trying to promote rights, democracy, and economic interests with the use of the legislative power, judiciary power, executive power, and of course with some important participation of civil society. For example, let me go ahead. We are dealing with important discussions in Federal Senate and also in Chamber of Deputies about some views about the accountability of internet in the way that we can promote an important discussion, but without some problems we see in the use of social media. We are discussing intensively the question of artificial intelligence. Of course, it's difficult to approve some views in the National Congress of Brazil, but important views that are discussed. They are passed first in the Federal Senate and now are in Chamber of Deputies. An important participation of civil society in a way to use our power to in some way promote the rule of law in this digital era. We have a lot of important actions and decisions in the courts, for example, Superior Court of Electoral Court, in the regulation of deepfakes, in the regulation of electoral propaganda. We also see in the Superior Court of Justice also a discussion and decisions about cross-border impacts of digital technology and how this impact should be. We have to take care about the rights and the exercise of rights here in Brazil. I didn't put here, but we have also in the federal executive administration important public policies discussions about the way that we should exercise of digital sovereignty to promote rule of law and artificial intelligence. We see, for example, in the science team, the discussion of the good use of artificial intelligence from a lot of fields. So conclusions, I really think that we as academics should think and analyze a lot the question of how we use the power or how should be used the power of state and popular power to promote a rule of law, to promote rights, to promote popular communication in this digital era. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ilton, Norberto. Let me say that the digital platforms and the democracy, digital platforms, I believe that affect the democracy through strictly affect the democracy through many ways, like webs, dark webs, cultural ways, and so on. So to discuss and to regulate the digital platforms, and for sure, it's very important to democratics. Okay, thank you very much. So let me say about the last but not least speech that is about the Professor Kenneth Williams from USA. Professor, thank you very much. It's your time.
Okay, thank you for inviting me, and looking forward to sharing some of my ideas and thoughts with the group. Okay, so this is me, Professor Kenneth Williams at Texas Tech School of Law, Texas Tech University School of Law in Texas, and I'm a professor of civil rights and constitutional law. And some of what I'm going to be discussing will be Professor Wolff has talked about, but I'm going to be discussing some of my concerns and but why I believe our democracy is in peril. And a lot of it has to do with, of course, some of the things that have happened since Trump took over in the last 6 months. One question that might come up is, well, Trump was president before, and he was voted out of office, even though he protested. The system actually pushed back. And obviously, Joe Biden took over. So what's different this time? Why is it different? Well, there are a couple of things that make it different. Okay, one is that he populated his administration previously because he didn't know anything about government. Okay, he couldn't even tell you how the U.S. Political system worked, according to accounts that of people who worked for him. Okay, so he basically had to rely on other people and professionals who had worked in previous Republican administrations before and who respected the rule of law. Professor Wolff talked about that, and respected norms, etc. Okay, those people are gone now. He has not populated his government with any sort of normative or any individuals who believe in norms. Okay, they're all sycophants, people who are going to do exactly what he wants them to do without any pushback whatsoever. Okay, so that's a real big difference. Okay, another big difference is that his previous administration, there was pushback against him. Okay, there was pushback by Congress, especially in 2018 after the Democrats took over and won the midterm elections. Okay, and even the courts, including the Supreme Court, there was some pushback. Okay, against him. That's not happening now. Okay, and that's why I'm very concerned. I'm going to talk about that more in a few minutes. But let me go through some of the things he has done. It's going to overlap with what Professor Wolff said, some of the things he's done. But let me start off with one of the question was asked about democracy and how would define democracy. Well, I think one of the keys to democracy, having a democracy, I think most of us would agree, would be having free and fair elections where the people are able to express their views and in order to vote for people who will put in policies that they support. Okay, well, Trump has gone after free and fair elections. Okay, and how has he done that? Just this past couple of weeks. Okay, he has tried to have the states, especially Texas, reapportion their House of Representatives. So basically, the way our system works is that we have a U.S. Senate, which is each state has 2 senators. So there's nothing can be done about that. But we do have the House of Representatives. That is a portion based on the census and the population of each state. And so traditionally, that's been done every 10 years, okay, that reapportionment process. And that's fair because obviously populations change. Some states grow, some states lose population. And we have a set number of representatives, 435 representatives. And so the Supreme Court has said that the principle one person, one vote, that individuals' votes should not be diluted, and you should have districts that are roughly equal in order to ensure that everyone's vote and views is considered, and they have an opportunity to express themselves through their vote. Now, what he has done, so Texas. The governor of Texas is Republican. The legislature in Texas is controlled by Republicans. So he senses that the polls are not looking good for him nationally in terms of the congressional elections in 2026. So now he wants to reapportion the seats in Texas because Texas is a large state and with a lot of Republicans. And so he wants to try to reapportion so that the GOP, the Republicans, will get 5 extra seats. Okay, and that could make a difference. Right now, the Republicans control Congress by just 3 seats. And so gaining 5 seats could make the difference of whether or not the Republican control or Democratic control of the House of Representatives. And that's important because, as I mentioned last time, 2018, when he was president, the Democrats won the midterm elections, and there was pushback. You know, he got impeached. There was all sorts of pushback. And the system basically was functioning somewhat the way it should function. It's not happening now. So one of the things that authoritarians do is they go after free and fair elections. They want to make the elections as unfree and unfair as they possibly can. And Trump is in the process of doing that. And his people, especially his vice president and others, have indicated they're not going to stop just at Texas. They're going to go to other states like Florida and Indiana and try to Missouri and try to reapportion some of those states in order to give the Republicans an advantage. And Professor Wolff talked about the rule of law in the Supreme Court, but this is an area where the Supreme Court has basically said this is called, we call it in America, political gerrymandering. And the Supreme Court has said that, so basically that means that you draw districts for Congress, and you do so in a way that advantages one of the two parties. And our Supreme Court has said that, well, that's a political question. We're not going to touch that. We're not going to consider political gerrymandering. So basically, we're going to leave that to the political process. Well, the problem with that is when you have like in Texas, Florida, you have a political process controlled by one party, they're able to dilute the votes of millions of voters in their states and the wishes of their voters. So that's one thing he is doing. He's trying to basically change the electoral process to benefit Republicans. And that's a way of moving toward authoritarianism and undermining democracy. Okay. Professor Wolff mentioned also another way that authoritarians operate is that they go after their political opponents. Okay, Professor Wolff mentioned that his administration has announced that they're investigating President Obama's individuals who worked in his administration, President Biden's administration. Ironically, though, President Biden and President Biden, based on a Supreme Court decision, would probably have immunity, and so he couldn't go up them directly, but he is threatening to go after individuals who work for those presidents. And so obviously that has a real impact. That's one thing that you study authoritarians. It's one thing they do regularly in order to obtain power and to maintain power is to go after the political enemies. Okay, he's even gone after state officials. There was a woman in New York, the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James. Yeah, she brought a suit against him because she alleged that he committed fraud while he was a businessman in New York. And the courts in New York agreed with her. So it wasn't like it was some frivolous political attack. The court found that he actually did commit fraud. Okay, well, he has now his people, the Department of Justice, which traditionally was independent, he has them going after her now. She's being investigated. Okay. And in many of those cases, let me say, I don't think there would be an actual conviction if these people were forced to stand trial. The problem would be that they have to hire a lawyer. They have to go through all the stress of defending themselves. Okay. And that's part of what the goal is here. Okay. Even if they don't end up with a conviction, they put these people through years. It will take years to clear their name and to resolve these cases. And that, I think, is part of the motivation. Okay. Professor Wolff, I mentioned also, he's using the military. We have a law. We have laws in the United States that basically prohibit the military from being used for any sort of law enforcement purpose. Okay. The Posse Comitatus Act. Okay. But there is an exception for if there's an actual insurrection. Federal military troops can be used temporarily, okay, to put down insurrection. Okay. But basically, we cannot, under the law in the United States, and this shows the breakdown of law, because now here in Los Angeles and today in Washington, D.C., he's using the military for law enforcement purposes, domestic law enforcement purposes. By the way, in Washington, D.C., the crime rate has gone down. So there is no reason to use even if it was permissible under the law. There's no outbreak of crime. Obviously, there is some crime, but every city and state has crime. But this could be a prerequisite of using the military in democratic cities. And what I'm concerned about is closer to the election. Okay, he might decide that, oh, well, San Francisco and Chicago, the crime rates have gone up as we get closer to the election, and sending in federal troops. Okay, well, that could have a real intimidating impact on the vote and suppress the vote if he were to do that. So that is a very real concern. Like I said, the law does not allow the president to send military troops just for domestic purposes. Okay, give you a couple of examples. Los Angeles, there were some riots in the 90s in Los Angeles after a police killing of an African American or wounding of an African American in Los Angeles. There were some riots after there was a not guilty verdict, the Rodney King case. And there were riots in Los Angeles, and there were troops sent by President Bush. But that was in actual riots that were occurring, and the key is that that was at the request of the local officials. Both the governor and the mayor of Los Angeles requested the troops. Okay, and that's typically the way it's been done. Okay, and it's been rare that it's been done that federal troops have been dispersed to a city, but it's always been done in the past at the request of local officials. Also happened in the 1960s. Lyndon Johnson did it. Okay, he sent troops to some cities that were under attack. Okay, let me also add that Washington D.C. I don't think it's an accident that Washington, D.C. has a large Black population. The officials who run Washington, D.C. are African American. And so I don't think there's a coincidence there. Let me put it this way. You're not going to see any troops in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is overwhelmingly white. Those sort of places, you're not going to see federal troops. Okay, they're going to be cities with large minority populations and democratically run cities. Okay, Professor Wolff mentioned his deportation policies. He's empowered ICE, which is the Immigration Customs Enforcement agencies. They're literally grabbing people off the streets. They're going to schools. They're going to sporting events to grab. They're engaging in racial profiling. They just filed a request with the U.S. Supreme Court asking for the right to racially profile, to consider race in their immigration enforcement. And Professor Wolff mentioned earlier that quote unquote big beautiful bill. Well, one of the things the big beautiful bill does is it provides significant funding for ICE. So we're going to have many more ICE agents as a result of that quote unquote big beautiful bill. And we're going to have many ICE agents who are going to be violating people's rights. And Supreme Court, the way things are going, they very well may give the administration the permission, the carte blanche, to consider race and immigration enforcement. And that has already caused terror and fear in Latino communities. And there are all sorts of problems. They won't come forward when there are crimes. They won't participate. They won't report crimes. I mean, all sorts of problems. Domestic violence becomes more prevalent when individuals are afraid to report crime. So it really does have an impact, not only on the individuals who are seized, and oftentimes, as Professor Wolff said, there are American citizens who are being seized. Okay, but just because they're Latino, they're being seized and not in no consideration as to whether or not they're actually American citizens. But it has an impact beyond those individuals in creating fear in these communities. So that's a real concern. And he has deported people without giving them a due process. There was an individual who was deported to El Salvador without any due process. So he's also cleared by the Supreme Court. He now can deport. They allowed him to deport individuals to countries, third countries, that the individual being deported has no connection to. Okay, like Sudan and Rwanda. So just imagine if you're from Venezuela or you're from Cuba or wherever, Dominican Republic, and you're being deported to Sudan or Rwanda. Okay, so but the Supreme Court, with their approval, he has begun to do that. Okay, one thing that has impacted in Brazil, he has imposed tariffs. Okay, well, under our Constitution, Congress has the authority to impose tariffs. Not the President of the United States. That's a power specifically under our Constitution that's been given to Congress, okay? Not the President, okay? He's claiming national emergency. Well, that case is running its way through the courts now. It looks like they're going to lose before the appellate court, but then the Supreme Court is the wild card. We don't know what's going to happen there. I was having a discussion with a colleague about it. Republicans have historically been opposed to tariffs, and it's a Republican court. So there is some hope that there would be some pushback by the court on his use of tariffs. My thought is that if they allow him to do that, they will allow him to do anything if they allow him to impose these tariffs, because there really is the Constitution and the laws of the United States, there really is no basis for a president to unilaterally impose tariffs on countries like Brazil, because he doesn't like the way the criminal justice system is functioning. Well, even if you accepted the proposition that the president could do it if there's a national emergency, how is that an emergency to the American people? There was an interview that Trump official was being questioned, and he was asked, well, how does those tariffs, how does that threaten what's going on in Brazil? How does that threaten the American people? Okay, that with Bolsonaro being prosecuted or not over that whole process, how does that threaten or impact the American people? And he couldn't answer it. He just brushed it aside. Okay, you probably have heard another thing he's done. He issued an executive order. So the 14th Amendment of our Constitution clearly says that if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen of the United States. Okay, that was in response to the 14th Amendment was enacted in response to the Dred Scott decision. The Dred Scott decision held that African Americans, whether they were free or slaves, were not entitled to U.S. citizenship. Okay, so the Congress specifically wanted to provide that anybody born on United States soil is a United States citizen. The 14th Amendment clearly states that. Okay, and that principle has been upheld by the courts, the Supreme Court, previous Supreme Courts have repeatedly upheld that. So we do have what's called birthright citizenship. You're born in the United States, with a couple of exceptions, like children of diplomats don't have citizenship, enemy combatants who might have children here, a couple of exceptions like that. But for the most part, if you're born in the United States, you're entitled to citizenship. That's been the accepted viewpoint by Democrats, Republicans, conservative, liberal, across the political spectrum. Nobody has really challenged that prior to President Trump. And the key is that, of course, he's allowed to argue against birthright citizenship, but we don't change in the United States. We don't have a system, or didn't have one, where a president through an executive order could override the Constitution. That's not how our system works. Okay, if you want to change the Constitution, there's a process. You have to go through Congress, and then you have to get 3/4 of the states to agree to that provision. Okay, if they want to change the Constitution or alter it. Okay, it's not done by executive order. That's not even legislation by Congress. That's just a president, and he's issued a ton of executive orders. Okay, and going after marginalized people, institutions like Professor Wolff talked about, universities, law firms. Okay, so this just gives you a glimpse of what's happening. And let me say that this is a real threat to democracy, of course. And I'm going to get into explain more. Now, let me point out, we've had presidents before who pushed the boundaries, okay, of the law and the Constitution. Okay, we obviously had Nixon, who tried to undermine the democracy. Okay, we had Truman, who tried to nationalize steel. We had FDR, who tried to pack the courts. We had Abraham Lincoln, who suspended the writ of habeas corpus. We've had presidents before. Okay, so this gets to the heart of my concern, which is that in all those instances, the system pushed back. So Nixon, the Congress, and the Supreme Court pushed back. He was forced out of office. Okay, Truman, the Supreme Court pushed back. He tried to nationalize the steel industry. The court pushed back and said, no, you can't do that. FDR tried to pack the courts. He didn't like the composition of the courts. The political system pushed back. The Congress pushed back. So no, we're not going to go along with that. And Lincoln's case, okay, Congress ultimately authorized and limited he sought congressional authorization for the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus, okay? The concern is that we're not getting pushback. The system is not working, okay? Under our system, okay, we have three branches of government. We got the presidency, the Congress, and the courts. The way it's set up, each is supposed to restrain the other, okay? When one exceeds their authority, then the other is supposed to step in and prevent that from happening, okay? And what's the concern that I have now is that the other branches are not pushing. The term has been used, imperial presidency. We are seeing that being created before our very eyes. Okay, we have no pushback from the Congress, very little to no pushback from the. Now the lower courts have been pushing back, but the Supreme Court really has not pushed back. Okay, one or two instances they did. Okay, but that they have not served as a check on the presidency. So that's really the concern. Like I said, in the past, when presidents have overstepped their authority, there's been a pushback. Okay, and they were not able to do so. And that's, I think, the real threat of democracy. We have a president who, through executive orders, is trying to change the Constitution through executive orders. Okay, and who's attacking, as I mentioned, universities. Professor Wolff, I mentioned, attacking universities, eliminating programs, eliminating departments that are so Congress. Okay, well, one of the main powers given to Congress is the power to enact tariffs. Okay, they have the power, clear power under our Constitution. No pushback whatsoever from Congress. Okay, he has held up money that Congress has allocated. Okay, no pushback by Congress, no response from Congress. Okay, he has basically eliminated the funding for the Department of Education. That's an agency enacted by Congress. No pushback by Congress. Okay, so Congress they've confirmed all these single fans. Okay, every single one of them. No pushback by Congress. Just last week, he didn't like the employment figures, so he fires the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Okay, because he didn't like the unemployment statistics. So now we're going to have statistics probably coming out of our government on things like unemployment and inflation, the GDP. Okay, and also in our system, the courts are supposed to provide a check, and that just simply has not been happening. Okay, the lower courts have done so, but the Supreme Court really has, by and large, gone along with just about everything he has wanted to do. They just basically they lose. The way it's been working is that they lose in the lower courts. They go to the appellate court, then they file an emergency order with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court usually grants his emergency order. And what's most distressing is that the Supreme Court typically grants the emergency order without any written opinion. It's typically in the Supreme Court, traditionally, since the beginning of the founding of the country, Supreme Court transparency. Supreme Court articulates, well, why are we ruling the way we do? They call it out a shadow docket. The term has been used for it. So he applies to the Supreme Court emergency order. Supreme Court, like just this weekend, emergency order to use race and immigration enforcement. Okay, Supreme Court might issue an opinion. They might issue an order agreeing with him, without even a rationale for doing so. Okay, so instead of they haven't restrained the president, what they have done is they restrained the lower courts. Ironically, there was a decision a few weeks ago, Trump versus Casa. Okay, and they said that the lower courts cannot issue what's called universal injunctions. Okay, so if a president, like with birthright citizenship, okay, they said, well, every person who has a child, undocumented person who has a child born in the United States, well, they have to individually go to court and get relief. Okay, a court cannot say, no, you cannot do this, United States government, anywhere in the country. Okay, so every undocumented person who has a baby has to go to court. Well, we know that's not going to happen. They don't have resources, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the time, okay, to do that. Okay, so again, instead of suppressing the president, checking the president, they've checked the district. Point out there are other institutions we've relied on that have let us down. One of the biggest ones is the media. The media, he has sued the media. His tactic is to sue them, go after the press, sue them. And for the most part, they have capitulated to him. We, of course, have media that's still critical, but for the most part, they have this capitulated. So one of the biggest networks in the United States, CBS. Okay, they have agreed to even not only pay him millions of dollars, they even agreed to have government monitor the network for bias. I mean, imagine that, the government monitoring a independent media. Okay, so that's a problem, and he's mentioned law firms and universities he's going after. Okay, so the framers set up a system that they thought we would. They recognized at some point we would have a out of control president. They set up a system but it just is not working. He has demonstrated that the framework that the framer set up is deficient, and you just it can't control, not control presidency. Okay, so my big hope is the 2026 midterms. I think he realizes that also. But that would be the hope, that through the 2026 midterms, we'll start to get some accountability and some pushback from Congress. Okay, well, thank you, and I look forward to other presentations and questions.
Okay, Professor Kenneth, thank you for your very important and panoramic considerations about the U.S. reality nowadays. So let's go to discussions and questions. I will let you free to talk each other. Okay, thank you very much. I believe that this kind of seminar was a kind of catharsis, collective catharsis, to talk about, to denounce, to register at internet our considerations, our very important considerations, and the search for ways of thinking and the actions to our students, our colleagues, and society at all. That's my point. Thank you very much, dear all.